All right, so I thought I would give you a tour of my irrigation shed that I built. Basically, it's just a small shed that holds rain barrels and catches water from the roof that then feeds down into the gutter and into rain barrels that are inside the structure. Now this top pipe is an overflow, so I have an initial smaller barrel here in the corner that everything feeds into first, and at the bottom of that barrel is this tube, which allows me to flush all the water out at the end of the season in the winter. And then again, this top tube is the highest tube in the system, but it's lower than the top of any barrel. So as the water level rises in this first barrel, it spills over into the other barrels that are in this shed. And as the water level on those barrels rise, at some point it will cause then the water level in this first barrel to rise as well, and then tip out and exit down this drain. That prevents water overflow inside, which we don't want. And then all of the barrels are connected via piping, so their level stays the same except for that first barrel, which is a little bit smaller. And then when I need water for my orchard, it comes out of this tubing. Now, when I first built this, I used a very simple kind of V splitter bought from Lowe's, but I realized very quickly that it leaked. Now, just to give you a quick sense of where we are, the orchard is right there. Where the top of the water level is only 5 or 6 feet above where the water's coming out down at the orchard. So I don't have a ton of pressure. Now, originally I had a backflow preventer here, which is really should be used more on a pressurized system to prevent water from flowing back into a house water system, regular indoor plumbing. But there wasn't enough pressure from the water to push through the valve on its way out, so I had to get rid of that. What I have here is a low flow battery operated timer, which lets me set the water to irrigate once every 3 days, and then I can choose the run time anywhere from 1 minute up to 2 hours. I think I'm gonna do 1 hour, but we'll see. And then below that is a filter system. All of my irrigation supplies are from Drip Depot, and so there's a filter here that filters out pollen and other items, and then the water comes down into my irrigation system. This is 1/2-inch black poly tubing. Now, the tubing that's in this area is above ground because we have about 5 to 7 more trees that are going to be planted this winter, and I wanted to have the lines above ground now so that I can place my trees in a sensible position to the main water lines. But as I follow the water line, I have a T that goes down to this row of trees, and the main water line keeps going in this direction and hits this set of trees over here, these 3 trees right here. This is where I've taken it below ground from here, but the line here splits and goes over to that tree right here, and then it splits over to these 2 trees and then also goes back that way. And then this main line kind of continues in this direction. So at the moment, I think I have 12 trees. Now at each tree, these are apple trees. At each tree, I have put these nozzles. Now, originally I tried drip tubing from Drip Depot, but the pressure in the system was not high enough to push water through the drip holes. There's a kind of sponge or some sort of media that prevents the water from just squirting out of the tubing. And so I didn't have enough pressure in my system to do that. If you were plugged up to an outdoor faucet that had normal home pressure, you would need a pressure regulator to bring the pressure of your system down to an appropriate pressure for a drip system, but it would be high enough in that instance to push through the drip tape. So what I next did was I got rid of the hoops that I had here of the drip tape, and instead I put a hoop of regular 1/4 inch tubing, and I used the hole puncher that you get in order to make connections to punch 2 holes on either side of the circle. And when I tried that with this system, it worked, but I wasn't getting drip irrigation. I was getting something a lot more akin to a strong spray that went inward. And I was happy at that time that the system at least pushed water through, or down from the irrigation shed down to the trees. And for me, that was a victory at the beginning of summer. As I kind of subsequently researched a solution to this for a real low pressure system, what you can do is get valves and basically set the valve to just barely open. You can use these valves to simply shut off water to a plant if you wanted, but you can also use them to actually kind of effectuate a drip. And so what I did was I took my circular tubing that had holes punched in either side of it, and I snipped that circle in half on the correct side of the hole punch so that the tubing stopped having a hole. And at the end of the tubing, I went ahead and inserted these valves. Now last week I put the valves on, but I didn't have any water in the system to set the correct valve openings in order to get the drip. Today we've had rain all week, and so I was able to come down here today and look at each of these nozzles and set them to the appropriate level and get a little bit of drip out of them. Now the far one is dripping very nicely. This closer one is a little bit closer to a light spray, but the pressure in this system can vary as the water level in the shed rises and falls, so there's going to be some variation, and I'd rather have water spitting through the system at a little higher rate at times than not going through the system at all. But we're here in just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. I have 12 apple trees that I purchased from Century Farm Orchard, kind of near Greensboro. They're heritage southern apple varieties, mostly wine saps and limber twigs, but there are a couple called Aunt Rachel's, which are native to Chatham County, which is where this property is located. And we have a few more varieties coming this winter, which I'll plant, as well as a couple of pear trees and a fig. And lastly, I have a couple of dwarf apples, apple varieties that I've grafted onto dwarf rootstock that are kind of currently pushing out right now, and in a couple of years I'll plant them out here, and I plan to espalier them because of their size. These are all the ones I currently have planted are semi-dwarf, and so they'll get a little larger. And of course I have cages around each of them right now because we have a family of deer that live on our property. We have about 15 acres, and I've set up trail cams in this area, and the deer love to eat the grass and whatnot in this particular area. So we have to do something to protect them from deer. And I guess I'll show, the last thing I'll show is the end of each of these runs. You know, as I said, I have one run that kind of comes down outside of these trees, and it branches off at various places, but this is the most outside line, which comes to right here, and it's got a cap on it so that at the end of the year I can take the cap off and drain the system in the winter. I need to get mulch or something to prevent grass growth here. The grass is sucking up a lot of my water right now, so that's kind of the next problem to tackle. And then of course we have a line that cuts off here, it goes to that far one, comes down here, and then it splits. I think one goes that way, and then one comes right here. That's another place I can drain from. This is all, where I'm at right now is on the low side of this hill, so all the water wants to drain this way. And as I said, I've got a line that comes right here, and drain the system here. Got a little bit of drip action going on here. Right now I'm testing how much water I use by leaving the valves open for 1 hour, which is my goal, to get just the right amount of drip in 1 hour, the right amount of water usage here in the evening when it's a little cooler. So again, that first tee comes down and snakes along these trees, and then there's the end cap from which I can drain. So I have four different end caps here where I can drain the system at the end of the year. So we're thinking, you know, one, if we can get these apple trees established, it'll be great. But in time, I'm thinking that this is probably a good area for a raised bed garden using water from the irrigation shed. We don't have a house out here yet, so we have no well, we have no access to water. These apple trees, my understanding is that they don't need a ton of water. They really need a good solid rain about once a week. And so really the idea is that this irrigation shed is a backup in the event of a drought. So this is our first year, our first summer with the apple trees. All of these trees were planted in the winter, and they were small little whips that we cut down to about waist high. You may be able to see where we cut right above a bud on this tree, but this is all first year growth, first year that we've had them, and then in the winter we will start to prune the tree in order to shape it appropriately in a modified central leader configuration. But this summer is a bit of a trial and error summer, trying to figure out their water needs and just get, kind of work the kinks out of the system. It's been a long process of trial and error, trying to get the shed built from scratch, get the plumbing together, keep wasps and other bugs and vermin out of the irrigation shed, and then ultimately get water flowing down to the trees. So I think we're in a good place. We're very close to having all the kinks worked out, and hopefully we'll keep fruit off of the trees for the first 3 to 5 years and let them establish their structure, and ultimately after that, hopefully we're pushing out a bunch of great tasty apples. I will keep you updated. So I thought I would show you the inside of the watershed. So sorry, I keep my tools in here as well. Here is where the water comes in to this first smaller barrel. Again, it kind of acts as a first flush, although I could do a better job of that. Lots of pollen does get into this system. And then once this fills up, if the lower valve is shut, water first flows down and into that valve. It's blocked by the valve, or the tubing. It flows into the tubing, blocked by the valve. And then the water level rises as water flows in. And at some point, it tips over into this bucket. These 3 buckets are connected towards the bottom, not on the bottom, and are also connected at the top to allow, air to push through, and the water in these 3 barrels will equalize and raise at the same rate until they get high. And of course, we don't want them to tip over. None of these barrels are sealed shut. They just have tops laying on them. And at some point, this is high. It's at the correct height, so as this rises, it starts to rise further in this barrel, and that's when it pushes out the overflow tubing. So I just have 3 55-gallon barrels in here now, really. I could add probably 2 more, although then that would reduce the utility to me of this as a storage shed, but maybe I'll do that once our house is built and I don't need to keep tools in here. But I did put a little shelf here, and then I have a window screen across this opening here, both on this side and on this side, although you can't see it, which allows me to have some airflow. So anyway, it's kind of dirty right now, but that is how it works. And I'll shut that in a bit, but that's the irrigation shed.